The divorce papers sit on my kitchen counter like architectural drawings for a demolished building. Final, stamped, irreversible. I run my fingers along the edge of the document, feeling the crisp paper that officially ends what I thought would last forever. The house echoes differently now, empty of her presence, her perfume, her lies. I built my life like a foundation, solid, measured, meant to last forever. That's what engineers do. We calculate load-bearing capacity, stress points, and structural integrity. We plan for earthquakes and hurricanes, but somehow I never planned for betrayal. My name is Michael Chen, and I'm 34 years old. For 12 years, I've designed bridges that span rivers and support systems that hold up skyscrapers. I understand how things break, the physics of failure, the mathematics of collapse, but understanding something intellectually and feeling it tear through your chest are vastly different experiences. I met Claire in the university library during my senior year. She was studying art history, surrounded by books about Renaissance painters, while I pored over structural engineering texts. The contrast should have been a warning. Artists see possibilities where engineers see limitations. But her laugh, bright and sudden in that quiet space, made me look up from my calculations. "You're the guy who color codes his notes, aren't you?" she had said, sliding into the chair across from me uninvited. Her blonde hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. "Efficiency," I had replied, suddenly self-conscious about my systematic highlighting. "Blue for formulas, green for someone who builds things meant to last centuries. You seem pretty fragile," she had interrupted, that smile playing at the corner of her mouth. We dated for 3 years before I proposed. Methodical, careful, following the blueprint I'd drawn for my life. Good job, stable income, down payment saved for a house. Check, check, check. The proposal itself was engineered for perfection. Sunset at the beach, photographer hidden in the dunes, a ring I'd, spent months selecting based on clarity, cut, and her subtle hints. Her father, Richard, insisted on the prenup. I remember sitting in his study, the walls lined with legal books and pictures of Claire through the years, gap-toothed elementary school photos, high school graduation, college acceptance letter framed like a trophy. "Nothing personal, Michael," he had said, sliding the document across his mahogany desk. "But I've seen too many marriages implode. This protects both of you." The adultery clause seemed almost insulting then. Complete forfeiture of marital assets, no alimony, no claims on premarital property. I had signed it without hesitation, even made a joke about it. "Guess I better stay faithful," I had laughed. Claire had laughed too, squeezing my hand under the table. 7 years. That's how long our foundation held before the first cracks appeared. It started with small things, the kind of hairline fractures you might miss if you weren't trained to spot structural weakness. Coming home an hour late from yoga class, her. Phone face down on the nightstand, suddenly password protected. The way she'd step out onto the porch to take certain calls, claiming the reception was better outside. I remember the exact moment I knew. Tuesday, March 15th, 11:47 p.m. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, and her phone buzzed with a text. The preview showed on the screen. "Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. When can I see you again?" My engineering mind immediately began calculating. Probability of innocent explanation, statistical likelihood of misunderstanding, margin of error in my assumptions. But numbers don't lie, and neither did the feeling in my gut. That cold, precise certainty that comes when a structure is about to fail. I should have known that even the strongest foundations can be undermined from within. I became the kind of man who spies on his wife on a Thursday morning in April. The decision came to me fully formed, like a structural solution appearing after hours of calculation, sudden, complete, and inevitable. The credit card statement lay spread across my home office desk, highlighted in my systematic way. Yellow for normal expenses, groceries, gas, her monthly massage. pink for the anomalies. A charge at Victoria's Secret on a Tuesday when she'd said she was at her mother's. A restaurant bill for two during her supposed solo shopping trip. A hotel bar charge, just drinks, but why would she be at the Marriott downtown at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday? My logical mind cataloged each discrepancy while my heart performed its own desperate calculations, trying to find innocent explanations. Maybe she was buying lingerie as a surprise. Maybe she met a friend for lunch. Maybe the hotel bar was a work meeting she'd forgotten to mention. But engineers are trained to recognize patterns, and the pattern was clear. Detective Ray Sullivan came recommended by my attorney, a consultation I'd scheduled under the pretense of updating our wills. Sullivan's office occupied the third floor of a building I'd helped design 5 years ago, a detail that felt cosmically cruel. He looked exactly like Central Casting would send for private investigator, weathered face, gray stubble, eyes that had seen too much. "Married?" he asked after I'd explained why I was there. 7 years, I answered. "Kids," he continued. "No. We've been trying," I replied. The lie came automatically now. He nodded slowly, making notes in a small pad. "You sure you want to know? Once that door opens, you can't close it again." "I need to know if my calculations are correct," I stated. He studied me then, really looked at me. "You're an engineer, right? You deal in facts, measurements, certainties. This work, it's messier than that. People aren't buildings. They don't collapse predictably." "But they do collapse," I said firmly. "Yeah," he agreed, sliding a contract across the desk. "They do." The next 3 weeks transformed me. I became hyper-aware of everything. The exact time Claire left for work, the mileage on her car, the frequency of her phone notifications. I documented it all in a spreadsheet, color-coded and cross-referenced. Tuesday, left at 8:15 instead of usual 8. Thursday, 47 miles on the odometer for a trip to the gym that should have been 12 miles round trip. Saturday, phone rang 4 times, all declined after 1 ring. Meanwhile, Claire became suddenly affectionate. She initiated intimacy for the first time in months. She cooked elaborate dinners, my favorite pasta, the complicated lamb dish she usually saved for special occasions. She'd curl against me on the couch, running her fingers through my hair while we watched TV. "We should talk about the baby thing," she said one night, her head on my chest. "I think I'm ready. Are you?" My body tensed involuntarily. 3 weeks ago, she could barely look at me. Now she wanted to create life together? My engineering mind recognized this pattern too. Overcompensation, like adding extra support beams to hide structural damage. "I actually hurt my back at work," I lied, the words coming out measured and calm. "Doctor says no heavy lifting or strenuous activity for a few weeks." "Oh, baby, why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her concern seeming genuine. But then again, so had her love. "Didn't want to worry you," I replied. She kissed my forehead and I smelled a cologne that wasn't mine. Faint, almost imperceptible, but there. Another data point from my spreadsheet. That night, unable to sleep, I stood in our bedroom doorway watching her. She looked peaceful, innocent even. Her blonde hair spread across the pillow we'd picked out together at Bed Bath & Beyond, debating thread counts and firmness levels like they mattered. How many times had another man run his fingers through that hair? How many lies had those lips whispered? My phone vibrated, a text from Sullivan. "We need to meet. I have what you need, but you're not going to like it." I looked back at Claire, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was built on a foundation I was about to demolish. For a moment, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. Not guilt, exactly, but a recognition of the approaching destruction. Then I thought about the cologne, the lies, the systematic deception, and my resolve hardened like concrete. Tomorrow I would know everything, and then I would act. The diner Sullivan chose was deliberately mundane, cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like motor oil, the kind of place where no one looked up when you walked in. He was already there when I arrived, a manila envelope on the table between his coffee cup and untouched pie. "Before I show you this," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I need to know you're prepared. This isn't speculation anymore." "I'm an engineer," I replied, sliding into the booth. "I deal in facts." He pushed the envelope across the Formica table. "Then here are your facts." The photographs were high-resolution, time-stamped, merciless in their clarity. Claire entering the Marriott downtown at 1:47 p.m. Claire and a man in the lobby, his hand on the small of her back, possessive, familiar. The elevator, her looking up at him with an expression I recognized but hadn't seen directed at me in months. They were kissing before the doors closed. "Derek Matthews," Sullivan said, sliding a background report across. 36, marketing executive, recently divorced, moved back to town 6 months ago. Derek Matthews. The name hit me like a structural failure I should have predicted. Claire's college boyfriend, the one she'd dated before me, the one who'd broken her heart senior year when he'd taken a job in California without her. She'd mentioned running into him at a coffee shop back in January, just a casual comment over dinner about how weird it was to see him after all these years. January, 6 months ago. The timeline aligned perfectly with when the distance started. "There's more," Sullivan continued, his voice gentler now. "Hotel receipts going back 4 months, text messages. I have a contact at the phone company, and—" He paused, sliding. Another document across. Medical records. The pregnancy test result from 2 weeks ago. Positive. My mind went into overdrive, calculating dates, probabilities. We hadn't had intimacy in 2 months. I'd been tracking that too. Another data point. In the collapse of our marriage. But 3 weeks ago, she'd tried to initiate, right after this test, right after she knew. "The timeline," I started, "doesn't add up for you to be the father," Sullivan finished, "based on the medical records and your documentation of marital activities. Conception occurred during a period when your relationship was already strained." I studied the photographs again. Derek was handsome in that careless way, tall, athletic, the kind of man who probably never color-coded anything in his life. In one photo, taken through a restaurant window, Claire was laughing at something he'd said, her hand touching his, across the table. She looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy. "There's a pattern with him," Sullivan continued, pulling out another report. 3 relationships in the last 5 years, all ended when things got serious. One woman filed a restraining order after he disappeared when she told him she was pregnant. He paid her to drop it. "He's going to leave her," I said, the realization crystallizing. "Most likely." "Guy's got a history of running when responsibility shows up," Sullivan confirmed. I thought about Claire's recent affection, her sudden interest in having a baby. She wasn't trying to reconnect with me. She was trying to trick me into raising another man's child. The calculated cruelty of it made my chest tight. "The prenup I signed," I said, pulling out my phone to call my attorney. "There's an adultery clause," Sullivan nodded. "I've documented everything to hold up in court. Videos, photos, receipts, witness statements from hotel staff. It's airtight." I spent the next hour in my lawyer's office, reviewing the prenup Richard had insisted on all those years ago. Ironically, his protection for his daughter would be her undoing. Adultery meant forfeiture of all marital assets. The house, the investment accounts, even the car I'd bought her for her birthday. She'd get nothing except what she'd brought into the marriage, which was essentially nothing since Richard had paid for the wedding, but never actually given her the trust fund he'd always promised. "We can file immediately," my attorney said. "With this evidence, she won't even be able to contest it." "Not yet," I said, my mind working through the optimal sequence. "I want the papers ready, but I need to control the timing. Can you have a process server ready on my signal?" That evening, I came home to find Claire cooking dinner, salmon with that honey glaze I loved, candles on the table, jazz playing softly in the background. She'd choreographed the perfect romantic evening. "Hi, baby," she said, kissing me with an enthusiasm that now felt like mockery. "I thought we could talk about the future tonight. You know, make some plans." "That sounds perfect," I replied, playing my part while calculating her destruction. "Let's definitely talk about the future." She smiled, unaware that her future was about to collapse like a building with compromised foundations, suddenly, completely, and irreversibly. I scheduled the demolition for a Tuesday morning. Claire would be served at exactly 10:15 a.m. during her weekly team meeting at the art gallery where she worked. Maximum witnesses, minimal opportunity for escape. I'd taken the day off, positioning myself in my home office where I could watch the security footage from our doorbell camera on my laptop. The process server was punctual. 10:14 a.m. He entered the gallery. I imagined Claire's confusion when the receptionist called her from the meeting, her irritation at the interruption transforming into shock as the papers were placed in her hands. My phone rang at 10:18. Her photo flashed on the screen, the one from our wedding day, her smile radiant and seemingly genuine. I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times in rapid succession before switching to texts. "What is this?" "Michael, this is insane." "We need to talk now." "This has to be a mistake. Please answer your phone. I'm coming home." I moved to the living room, arranging my evidence on the coffee table. Photographs in chronological order, hotel receipts organized by date, phone records, highlighted and tabbed. The positive pregnancy test in its own folder, labeled simply Exhibit D. She burst through the door at 10:52, her face flushed, mascara already smearing. "Michael, what the hell is this?" she demanded. "Divorce papers," I replied, my voice steady. "I thought that was clear. This is crazy. You can't just... We need to talk about this," she protested. "We are talking. Have a seat," I said calmly. She remained standing, gripping the papers. "Adultery? Are you insane? I haven't..." "January 28th, I interrupted, sliding the first photograph across the table. "Marriott downtown, room 412. You told me you were shopping for your mother's birthday." Her face paled, but she rallied. "That's not... You had me followed?" she accused. "February 15th, I continued, placing another photo. "March 3rd, March 9th, 10th, and 11th while I was in Chicago." I laid them out like playing cards, each one another nail in the coffin of her deception. "You don't understand," she started, her voice shifting to desperation. "It didn't mean anything." "April 2nd, I said, placing the medical record on top of the photos. "Positive pregnancy test. Interesting timing, considering we haven't been intimate since February. I have that documented, too, if you'd like to see the spreadsheet." She sank onto the couch, the papers crumpling in her grip. "Michael, please. Let me explain." "Explain what? How you tried to trick me into raising Derek Matthews' child? How you suddenly became affectionate after months of distance, right after finding out you were pregnant with another man's baby?" I asked coldly. "It might be yours," she said weakly. "According to my records, we last had relations on February 2nd, I stated coldly. "The medical evidence shows conception occurred in mid-March, so unless we're discussing immaculate conception, that child isn't mine." Her face crumbled completely. "Derek doesn't... He won't..." she stammered. "Return your calls?" "No, I imagine he won't. He left town yesterday, according to my investigator. Transferred to the Seattle office. Funny how that happened right after he learned about your pregnancy," I informed her. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, calling Derek. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. And again. Each unanswered call, another crack in her composure. "The prenup your father insisted on," I continued, my voice clinical, "is very clear about adultery. You forfeit all claims to marital assets. The house, the accounts, the car, all mine. You'll need to be out by Friday." "Friday? Michael, please, I have nowhere to go." she pleaded. Your parents' house, I assume. I've already sent them copies of the evidence, so they're aware of the situation, I stated matter-of-factly. You sent to my parents? She asked, her voice breaking completely. Your father needed to understand why his precious prenup was being activated. He was quite thorough with that adultery clause, almost like he suspected his daughter might be capable of this, I replied. She tried everything then, tears, promises, even attempting seduction, reaching for my hand. I pulled away, standing up. Michael, I love you. It was a mistake. We can work through this. Couples therapy, she begged. With whose money? You have none. Your gallery job pays barely above minimum wage. Derek's gone. Your parents are mortified. And you're pregnant with a child whose father abandoned you the moment responsibility appeared, I said harshly. You're cruel, she whispered. No, I replied, gathering the evidence back into neat folders. I'm precise. There's a difference. Your belongings will be packed by a moving service on Thursday. Any items of disputed ownership will be itemized and reviewed by attorneys. I walked to my office, leaving her sobbing on the couch. Through the door, I could hear her calling Derek again, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Then her mother. Then friends, trying to find someone, anyone, who would take her side. By evening, she was gone, a single suitcase in her hand. She tried one more time at the door. I'm sorry, she said. I know it doesn't matter, but I'm sorry. You're right, I said, closing the door. It doesn't matter. Through the window, I watched her load the suitcase into her car, the one she'd have to return by Friday. Her movements were mechanical, defeated. The confident woman who'd tried to deceive me into raising another man's child was gone, replaced by someone facing the complete demolition of the life she'd built on lies. The house felt different with her gone, structurally the same but fundamentally altered, like a building after renovation. I walked through each room, already planning the changes I'd make. New furniture, new paint, everything she'd touched would be replaced, renovated, made mine again. 6 months later, I received the text from my former mother-in-law, Margaret. It was brief, almost formal. Claire delivered a healthy boy yesterday. Thought you should know. I stared at the message for a moment, then archived it. The boy would be Derek's son, carrying his genetics and his father's legacy of abandonment. According to my attorney, Derek had returned to town just long enough to sign away his parental rights, a legal maneuver that freed him from child support obligations in exchange for no custody claims. He disappeared again immediately after, taking a job in London this time, an ocean between him and his responsibilities. House had been transformed in the months since Claire left. I'd hired contractors, redesigned the entire space with an engineer's efficiency. The walls she'd painted warm yellows were now clean grays and whites. The cluttered art she'd loved replaced with architectural photographs. Every trace of her. Presents systematically removed and renovated. My sister Janet visited on a Saturday afternoon, walking through the renovated space with obvious concern. It looks like a magazine, she said, running her hand along the pristine granite countertop. Beautiful, but what? I asked. Cold, Michael. It looks cold, she replied. We sat in the redesigned living room, afternoon light streaming through. Windows I'd had enlarged for better structural symmetry. Janet had been supportive throughout the divorce, but I could see questions forming behind her careful expression. Do you ever think? She started, then paused, choosing her words carefully. Do you ever wonder if you were too calculated about it all? She tried to make me raise another man's child, I responded. I know, and that's unforgivable. But the way you dismantled her life, piece by piece, it was so methodical, so... She hesitated. Effective? I suggested. I was going to say cruel, she corrected. I considered this, looking around my perfectly ordered space. Engineers solve problems, Janet. She was a problem. I solved it. She was your wife, she reminded me. No, I corrected. She was someone pretending to be my wife while f***ing her ex-boyfriend and planning to defraud me into raising his child. The woman I married never existed. Janet sighed but didn't argue further. After she left, I stood in my kitchen looking at the space where Claire used to make her morning coffee, always leaving grounds scattered on the counter despite my repeated requests for cleanliness. The memory felt distant, like reviewing old blueprints for a demolished building. Through social media, which I checked periodically with professional detachment, I tracked Claire's collapse. She'd moved back with her parents, their retirement, now complicated by an unexpected dependent and a newborn. Her gallery job hadn't survived the scandal. Small towns have long memories for adultery, especially when it involves prominent families. The photos she posted were telling in their forced optimism. Her holding the baby, Thomas apparently, with captions about blessed and everything happens for a reason. But I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight gain she couldn't shed, the cheap apartment visible in the background when she'd finally moved out of her parents' house after 4 months of what I imagined were tense, shame-filled dinners. Richard, her father, had reached out once, 3 months after the divorce. We met for coffee at his request. I wanted to apologize, he had said, looking older than I remembered. The prenup was meant to protect her, but you didn't think she'd be the one violating it, I finished. He nodded slowly. I failed her somehow. Her mother coddles her. Now, says you were too harsh, but I know better. She made her choices. How is she? I asked. Struggling. Derek sends money occasionally, not court-ordered, just guilt payments that arrive randomly. Never enough, never reliable, she's working. Part-time at a daycare center, the irony of which isn't lost on anyone, he answered. And the child? I inquired. Looks just like his father, Richard said bitterly. She sees Derek every time she looks at him. I think that's the worst punishment of all, raising a constant reminder of the man who abandoned her for the life she destroyed to be with him. I felt something then. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of mathematical balance. Actions and consequences properly aligned. The last time I saw Claire was at a grocery store, 8 months after the divorce. She was in the baby food aisle, Thomas in the cart seat, comparing prices on formula with the focused intensity of someone counting every dollar. She looked up and saw me, her face cycling through expressions. Shame, regret, a flash of the anger she probably felt entitled to. I nodded, polite but distant, the way you acknowledge someone you used to know. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it, turning back to the formula prices. I continued to the checkout, my basket full of ingredients for a dinner party I was hosting. Colleagues, new friends, a life rebuilt on solid foundations. Standing. In my renovated kitchen that evening, preparing dinner for guests who knew nothing of my previous life, I thought about structures and collapse, about the things we build and the forces that destroy them. Claire had been like a hidden fracture, a weakness in the foundation I hadn't detected until almost too late. But I'd survived the collapse. More than survived. I'd cleared the debris and built something better, something entirely mine. The house stood solid around me, every beam and joint precisely placed, engineered to last. My phone buzzed. A text from a woman I'd met at a conference, confirming our dinner plans for next week. I smiled, already calculating the probability of success, the structural integrity of potential futures. This time I'd check the foundations more carefully. This time I'd build something that would last. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.